Roll sound.
Sound speed.
Camera.
Camera speed.
Here we go. Everybody's focused back.
Scene Apple one. Take one. Mark.
And action.
Here at CineFix, we've spent a lot of time watching movies and analyzing them for the channel, but it is a very different thing to talk about movies than it is to actually get your hands dirty.
And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to treat filmmaking like an experiment.
To find a way to not just talk about our theories, but to actually test them.
We're going to pick some great scenes, make some guesses as to why they work the way they do, and then recreate them in order to test that hypothesis.
It's the science of the art of filmmaking.
So welcome to Film Lab.
So one of the most interesting things about filmmaking is how the camera isn't just a neutral, sort of fly-on-the-wall documentarian, right? Like, it's an active participant in the narrative of a film.
Yeah, it's not just the storyteller, it can have an effect on the story itself.
So one of the first questions we wanted to ask is, can we change the story that a scene is telling by changing only the camera placement?
David Fincher is so good at this, and the entirety of The Social Network, it's just people sitting at tables, but it feels like an action scene. There's this really exceptional scene where they're in the deposition room and it starts raining. The camera there, I think, is doing something really clever, and I'd like to take a closer look.
I think it's a great scene.
I think we can do it too.
All right, let's take a look.
When we met in January, I expressed my doubts about the site, where it stood with graphics, how much programming was left that I had not anticipated.
The lack of hardware we had to deal with, site use, the lack of promotion that would go on to successfully launch the website.
This was the first time you raised any of those concerns, right?
So this whole first bit, not like it's standard lawyer stuff. You get close-up shots to where he's like trying to dive in.
You get the close-up shot of the lawyer.
Right.
He's trying to ratchet up the intensity,
Yeah.
and it is answered by Mark not picking up the intensity.
Yeah.
Mark evades this first trap and runs away to this hole he goes to hide in when he says it's raining.
Literally here, the focus is off of the lawyer completely.
Mr. Zuckerberg, do I have your full attention?
No.
And then the lawyer tries one more time, and this time, instead of engaging him with lawyerly questions, he tries to scold him, and then Mark like snaps in, and then you have these series of oppositional shots, matching shots between them where they're like head to head, and then boom, you end in this, the only shot you only see one time, which is the head-on close-up of Mark. And then there's this long moment that's just 2 lines on the script that gets like 5 different shots, and then he just like retreats back into his hole.
12:45. Why don't we say that's lunch?
Back at 2:30.
If you read the scene on the page, it really just seems like Mark eviscerates them and like gets the best of them.
Right.
Which, when I watch the scene, by the end of the scene, you're like, oh, Mark done f***ed up.
Yeah. I think we can both agree that it changes the subtext of the scene to the lawyer sort of trapping Zuckerberg into like revealing himself.
Yes.
If this scene is about the lawyer besting Zuckerberg, how are we going to change that to make this scene about something else?
We make it so that the lawyer doesn't win the scene.
We don't change performance, we don't change the pace. The only thing that we change is the shot compositions.
Camera can go anywhere I want it to.
Camera can go anywhere you want it to go, and it's got to tell a story about Zuckerberg winning this confrontation with the lawyer.
So here's the thing. I don't think that what's happening in the space supports a version of the scene where Zuckerberg comes on top of the lawyer. But what I think I could probably shoot is a version where Zuckerberg comes out on top of the Winklevoss twins.
First things first though, we can't shoot an experiment and then compare it to the actual David Fincher film. We need to shoot our own version that's identical to the original. We have to make a control.
So the approach we're taking for this particular scene is to take more of a theater approach, more of a black box theater approach, where we're just taking the essentials of what your eye sees and using those as our set instead of building the entire thing.
In order to match the look of The Social Network, we're trying to get as close as we can with our camera build. In the original Social Network, they used a Red 1 MX camera. Today we're shooting on an upgraded version of those, the Red Dragon. They also shot the original on Master Primes, but we got an awesome donation from the camera division. They gave us a full set of Ultra Primes that can get us really close to the quality and sharpness that the Master Primes would have provided.
Our next challenge is casting. It's important that we stay faithful to the original feel of the social network, but we don't want mimicry. We want someone to figure out the internals of the performance and then reverse engineer it to eventually arrive at something that looks very similar to what Fincher's cast did.
Most importantly, we have to plan the visual story. Now, it seems to us that the original visual story goes something like this. The Winklevi's lawyer tries to grab Mark's attention, but Mark doesn't want to fully engage. Eventually, he takes the bait and goes at his adversaries head to head. And finally, when the dust clears, everybody realizes that this is what the lawyer wanted all along, and Mark retreats back to his hole.
That's the story we think Fincher's camera is telling, and we're gonna try to change it to something like this. Same basic beginning, with the lawyer still trying to grab Mark's attention and Mark avoiding it, but the middle starts to change. When Mark finally takes the bait, he turns his attention and anger onto the defenseless Winklevi and attacks. And by the end, when the dust clears, it's actually the Winklevi who are left in the rubble.
Okay, so we got all the pieces in place. We got the actors here. We got them rehearsed. We got the set built. Everything's lit.
We just have to shoot the control.
We just gotta shoot the control. Let's do it. Roll sound.
Sound speed.
Camera.
Camera speeds. Need Apple what? Take what? Mark?
And action.
When we met in January, I expressed my doubts about the site, where it stood with graphics, how much programming was left that I had not anticipated, the lack of hardware we had to deal with, site use, the lack of promotion that would go on to successfully launch the website. This was the first time you raised any of those concerns, right?
I'd raised concerns before.
Bullshit.
Gentlemen, I'm talking about the meeting in January to which this letter is referring.
Yeah.
Let me rephrase this. You sent my client 16 emails. In the first 15, you didn't raise any concerns.
Is that a question?
In the 16th email, you raised concerns about the site's functionality. Were you leading him on for 6 weeks?
No.
Then why didn't you raise any of these concerns before?
It's raining.
I'm sorry?
It just started raining.
Mr. Zuckerberg, do I have your full attention?
No.
Do you think I deserve it?
What?
Do you think I deserve your full attention?
I had to swear an oath before we began this deposition, and I don't want to perjure myself, so I have a legal obligation to say no.
Okay, no. You don't think I deserve your attention?
I think if your clients want to sit on my shoulders and call themselves tall, they have a right to give it a try. But there's no requirement that I enjoy sitting here listening to people lie. You have part of my attention, you have the minimum amount. The rest of my attention is back at the offices of Facebook, where my colleagues and I are doing things no one in this room, including and especially your clients, are intellectually or creatively capable of doing. Did I adequately answer your condescending question?
It's 12:45. Why don't we say that's lunch?
Back at 2:30?
And cut. Fantastic. There's no way we can change the meaning of this scene if we don't shift the focus away from the conflict between Mark and Gage, the lawyer, to the Winklevi twins, and I think the best way to do that is to use the camera to literally shift the axis. To me, this small shift feels like it moves where the energy is coming from, almost like the whole shot is giving him the side eye.
All right, is that OTS enough for illustrating?
That's perfect. That can be our one. We ready to go?
I think so.
All right, let's roll on the sound. Action.
I'd raised concerns before.
Bullshit.
Gentlemen, I'm talking about the meeting in January to which this letter is referring.
Yeah.
And cut.
Great. I'm sorry.
Great way back. Great way back. Then, of course, the question is, when do you want to shift the focus? And I think we want to shift the focus when Mark is really shifting the focus, when he is sort of letting go of the conflict between him and the lawyer. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to put the camera on a dolly and move it over at the point Mark makes the shift in the scene, signaling to the audience, it's not here you should be looking, it's actually over here.
I need some bodies, stand-in bodies.
He's me, I'm him.
Oh.
This was the first time you wrote.
All right, let's speed this up. Sound speed. And action.
You don't think I deserve your attention?
I think if your clients want to sit on my shoulders and call themselves tall, they have a right to give it a try. There's no requirement that I enjoy sitting here listening to people lie.
Let's cut. The moment at the end there, where there's like this look and this wink, if the wink plays like that, the gig is up. People know that they've won the scene. But we're gonna stay on camera with our focus on him as if he doesn't realize that he's getting winked at, as if the wink doesn't land.
Gentlemen, can I see your eye lines to Elliot, please?
I love seeing this. And action.
Did I adequately answer your condescending question?
So we got most of the scene done already. We got an alien.
The ending totally throws it off. You totally get the sense that the Winklevoss's lawyer is winning the scene, right, and we have to switch that around. I think the Winklevosses at the end, if you look at them on screen, they look pretty beat up. They don't know that they've won the scene. So I think if we just move the camera and look at them.
But here's the thing. I don't think you can avoid seeing Mark because that feels like just too much cheating.
Tell me if this follows the rules. Mark is in frame, but I want people not to look at him, so I'm just gonna rack the focus away from him. Can we do that exactly like the shot that the scene ends on? Can we just do that entirely on the other side of the table?
Basically, shoulder, Mark.
And we're starting from the same place. Action.
It's 12:45. Why don't we say that's lunch?
Back at 2:30?
That is a wrap on everybody.
If you have not filled out a paperwork packet, make sure you see Francesca. Now, if we want to figure out whether these two different versions tell different stories, we got to see how people experience them. So we put together two different focus groups to watch them without knowing which version they're seeing.
And while they were watching this, so were you. A little while ago, we invited our viewers to join us in watching online, and we split you up randomly between the two versions.
When we met in January, I expressed my doubts about the site, where it stood with graphics, how much programming was left that I had not anticipated, the lack of hardware we had to deal with, site use, the lack of promotion that would go on to successfully launch the website. This was the first time you raised any of those concerns, right?
I'd raised concerns before.
Bullshit.
Not to us.
Gentlemen, I'm talking about the meeting in January to which this letter is referring.
Yeah.
Let me rephrase this. You sent my client 16 emails. In the first 15, you didn't raise any concerns.
Is that a question?
In the 16th email, you raised concerns about the site's functionality. Were you leading him on for 6 weeks?
No.
Then why didn't you raise any of these concerns before?
It's raining.
I'm sorry?
It just started raining.
Mr. Zuckerberg, do I have your full attention?
No.
Do you think I deserve it?
What?
Do you think I deserve your full attention?
I had to swear an oath before we began this deposition, and I don't want to perjure myself, so I have a legal obligation to say no.
Okay, no. You don't think I deserve your attention?
I think if your clients want to sit on my shoulders and call themselves tall, they have a right to give it a try. There's no requirement that I enjoy sitting here listening to people lie. You have part of my attention, you have the minimum amount. The rest of my attention is back at the offices of Facebook, where my colleagues and I are doing things no one in this room, including and especially your clients, are intellectually or creatively capable of doing. Did I adequately answer your condescending question?
It's 12:45. Why don't we say that's lunch?
Back at 2:30?
When everybody was done watching in person and online, we asked them some questions about what they'd seen, and we got a ton of data. Poor Billy had to go through all of it.
We were basically asking two questions. The first question is, can we reframe the conflict? The second question is, can we change the winner?
So in terms of like the main conflict of the scene, who thinks it was specifically between Zuckerberg and the lawyer?
I think the scene was about Zuckerberg letting that lawyer know that Zuckerberg was the smarter of the two people in that exchange.
But the lawyer is representative of the Winklevosses, so it is between him and the Winklevosses.
Yeah, but that's like saying that like, if I have an issue with you, Gabe, then I have an issue with IGN.
Well, you take it up with HR then, Sydney.
So you think The Winklevi in general didn't have much to do with the proceedings in this scene.
It did not seem like
I mean, from what we saw, no.
Between whom was the primary conflict of the scene?
The rush feels like it's between the Winklevoss twins and Zuckerberg, even though they don't say anything to each other.
The Winklevoss is speaking through the lawyer.
Kind of starts up, and I'm like, okay, it's between Mark and the lawyer, but the scene kind of opens up, reveals the twins, and then that's kind of established as the main tension.
Did we reframe the conflict? I think the answer is very clear that we did.
This graph here shows us how strongly people agreed that the main conflict of the scene was between Mark and the Winklevi. Answers from the control group are in blue. Answers from the experimental group here are in red. The x-axis ranges from strongly disagreed on the far left to strongly agreed on the far right.
So this is showing that the control group generally disagreed that the conflict was between Mark and the Winklevi.
Yes.
And the experimental group has a much bigger peak over there, although it was kind of split. So we moved the needle.
We definitely moved the needle on the first question.
What about the second question? Who won the conflict?
That's interesting and a little bit less impressive.
I will say the one thing that we weren't expecting that I got out of the control group was some strong arguments about why Zuckerberg actually won the conflict. Who thinks Zuckerberg won this confrontation? Show of hands.
Well, I think so, absolutely. Yeah. I don't think so, because he had to answer the question.
It felt kind of like at the end of it, he was like a kid throwing a tantrum or something, or like being like, I'm not gonna do this. And the lawyer was like, well, legally, like, you kind of have to.
Who here, by a show of hands, thinks Zuckerberg came out on top by the end of the scene? Who here, that's everybody, nobody thinks Zuckerberg did not come out on top?
What I think is that maybe we might not be able to move that needle as far as we wanted to because the needle is farther in that direction than we anticipated.
In this graph, blue is still the control group, red is still the experimental group, but this time the x-axis measures how strongly people believe that Mark won the conflict in the scene, ranging from thinking he didn't win at all on the far left to thinking he really did on the far right.
There is clearly a higher peak on the experimental version that people think Mark won, which was our goal.
They've pretty clearly shifted from one to the other, but it's not a big shift. They've not moved all the way across the graph.
We were rooting for one big blue spike on the left and one big red one on the right.
Yeah, that would have been really nice.
Sure.
If you saw our version, you were more likely to think Mark won, but turns out your experience with the focus group was pretty close to correct, and that people even in the control group sort of thought Mark won a lot too, and that did make it harder to move the needle.
Look, I'm on the far left of that graph.
Yeah, I'm with you and 3 other people, and that's it. The only thing left to do now is decide, does this count as a successful experiment?
I think we gotta call it a mix.
Yeah?
On the one hand, in just moving the camera, we managed to tell an entirely different story. One about Mark's battle with school rivals over pride rather than with a lawyer over the legal facts. But on the other hand, we didn't make much of a dent in who people thought the winner of the battle was. Mostly because our initial reading of the scene was pretty far from what everyone else seems to think.
Yeah, I did not see that coming.
I think that was the issue.
It's tempting, I think, as film analysts and filmmakers to sort of idealize the role of director as this person who sits down and conceptualizes this vision of a movie and then through the powers of their craft beams it directly into the skulls of every single viewer identically. But that just isn't actually the case. Like, even with a director as exacting and precise as we know Fincher is, like, people watch that movie in very different ways.
Obviously, the camera's a powerful tool. We knew that, but it's not the only tool. And if you're going to beam something directly into every viewer's skull, you need to use every tool at your disposal. So you know what that means?
I do not.
We got to do more experiments.
It does mean that.
So that is the inaugural episode of Film Lab. Let us know what you think about it. Are there any scenes that you think are worth experimenting on? Let us hear about it down in the comments section. And as always, subscribe to CineFix for more Film Lab. Hopefully.
Someday.
It took so long to do this.
My arm's better.
I don't want to pull the curtain all the way back, but I'm older now.